Hey guys, Mel here. Welcome to Knit to Know, where I share my favorite knitting techniques, tips, and tricks. Today I'm sharing one of my favorite cast-on methods for when I'm going to work 1x1 ribbing flat, and that's the tubular long tail cast-on. I really like this cast-on method because it creates a neat and stretchy edge. This method also matches the look of the tubular sewn bind-off, which I've done at the top of this swatch. So let's get started. As the name suggests, you will need a long tail. Today I'll be doing a 12 stitch swatch, and I like to estimate how long my tail is just by dropping the number of stitches around my needle. And of course, if you're going to do a really long cast on, you don't have to sit there counting off 99 stitches. You could just count off 10 and double up your yarn until you get to the right length. So we're going to get set up in the slingshot hold. We have the working yarn going to the top of the screen and yarn tail going to the bottom. Get your finger and thumb underneath, and we're going to grab the yarn with the rest of our fingers, and we've got ourselves a slingshot. So this particular cast on method, we will be casting on in pattern, and you can start with either a purl stitch or a knit stitch. So if you want to start with a purl stitch, place your needle on top of the yarn and you dive down and away from yourself, and that will create a purl stitch for stitch number 1. I'll show you that one more time. Needle on top, dive down and away. That's a purl. If you want to start with a knit stitch, we're going to set the needle on top, dive down towards yourself, and that's going to create the knit stitch. I'll show it to you one more time. Needle on top, dive down, turn towards yourself, and that creates a knit stitch. So let's continue on with casting on the rest of our stitches. So this is the knit stitch. Next we need a purl stitch. And guys, I want you to remember purl up and knit down. That's going to help you remember which finger to start with, depending on which stitch you need to cast on next. So purl stitches next, purl up. So we are going to point our needle up towards our index finger, and we're going to swing this needle over under the yarn, back down over under the yarn coming from our thumb, swing back around, and that creates a purl stitch. Next is a knit stitch. Remember, knit down, so we're going to start with needle down, over, under, turn it back up, over, under, swing it all the way under and back around, and that creates a knit stitch. Okay. If you ever get confused and you're not sure, was it purl up? Purl down? No, purl up. I don't know. This bump tells you which direction to go next. So this bump is pointing towards me or towards my thumb. And so if I point my needle down towards the thumb, over, under, back around. Oh, look at that. We made the knit stitch. Knit down. All right. If we look again, that bump is pointing towards our index finger. So we swing our needle up, over, under, then down, over, under, back around, and there's another purl. So I'm going to go ahead and cast on the rest of the stitches. Okay, now our last stitch can be a little loose, so what I like to do is I will twist the yarn tail around. Okay, there's my working yarn. Here's my yarn tail. I'm going to secure it underneath my hand alongside the needle there. And now we've got turn. Okay, careful, the stitches can rotate a bit. Okay, now we're going to get into the tubular portion of this tubular cast on. So the tube that we create is achieved with a couple rows or more of double knitting. So you always need to work in pairs of double knitting. 2 rows of double knitting equals 1 regular row. And you can do this with a single pair or 2 pairs, so that's a total of 2 or 4 stitches depending on how big of a tube you want to make. And another thing we need to consider or be careful of, the way that the stitches are cast on, the knit stitches are actually cast on in the opposite direction. So for this first row and this first row only, we need to knit through the back loop of the knit stitches. So let's go ahead and knit through the back loop of our first stitch. Next is a purl stitch. We're going to bring the yarn to the front and we're going to slip it purlwise. Next, knit through the back loop, yarn in front, slip purlwise. At the end of the row, the last stitch is a purl stitch. But instead of slipping this purl, I always like to actually purl the last. Alright, time to turn. So that was 1 double knit row. We need to complete the pair and do another one. Now our knit stitches are in the correct orientation, so we will be knitting them as normal through the front. Let's knit. And again, we are going to bring the yarn to the front and we're going to slip the purls purlwise. And purl the last purl. Alright, so that's 1 pair of double knitting complete. Personally, I like to stop at this point and start my regular 1x1 ribbing, so that's knitting all the knits and purling all the purls. No more slip stitches. You can do another pair of double knit rows if you'd like to have a larger tube at the bottom of your work. Another thing to consider, because this creates a tube at the bottom, your stitches can appear a little bit looser than your actual 1x1 ribbing. So you may want to consider starting this cast on with a smaller needle, and then don't forget to switch to your regular needle size for your ribbing when you switch to knitting all the knits and purling all the purls. In this swatch that I've done, I've only done 1 pair or 2 rows of double knitting here at the bottom. So there you have it, guys. That is the tubular long tail cast on, my method of choice for when I'm going to work 1x1 ribbing flat. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy knitting.